I need a roll call.
Yes. Richard Perales.
Here.
Luis Avon.
Here.
Pancho Abram.
Here.
Andres Gonzalez.
Here.
Jose Gonzalez.
Here.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, you do have 4.
All right, I'll ask you to take a look at the minutes of our meeting of September 12th.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Have a motion to accept the minutes of our September 12th meeting.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
I'm going to vote to abstain, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, only because.
Yeah, but you don't know it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine, motion carries. All right, coming before the board here, our first item on the agenda is, let's first of all report on the following BOA order. BOA order number 20-2018, applicant Ricardo Orgazza and Maria Calvan. The property, lot 30, block 9, Sierra Vista, unit 5, located at 4724 Los Cerezos Drive. We had denied that, and I think what's coming back by the picture is that they went ahead and finished the project, despite the fact that we've denied it. Now, what is our process? Anna, please refresh my memory. After, if they denied it and didn't do anything about it, now we contact the
After the denial, they have 30 days to correct.
Right.
And we have the zone enforcement going back to the property to check if they corrected. If they have not corrected, then they give them a citation, and then we go ahead and send to the legal department.
After the last citation, it's another 30 days or 60 days at that point?
No, after that point, we send it to legal department.
Yeah,
We send
okay,
an
so
email
legal
to the
department.
legal department.
You know, and that's where we actually could, y'all to give us some help, because what ends up happening is we end up having people come in here with, many times, most of the time, with hat in hand, saying, oh, well, I didn't know I needed one. Well, most of them do know it, and then when we issue a citation, before they finish it, they do what they need to do to correct it. They go ahead and correct it. I mean, they go ahead and finish building it, and all the neighbors are saying, well, wait a minute, if he can do it, then I can do it.
Right.
So we hate to have this happen, but we need to order the certificate of demolition and a notice of demolition, and then follow up on it.
It looks like they comply though.
The second picture is the
Yes.
finished product, and the top is
The
the
picture that you
previous.
see below is the most recent, that was taken September 24th.
Oh, it is corrected. Oh, I was looking at the top
No,
one.
no, no, the top one is how they came in with, before the board, with the encroachment.
Oh.
The picture that's
So they
below is the picture where they corrected.
Okay.
So you can see that
Okay,
it's a
but-
much shorter structure.
But did we authorize it to that setback?
Yes,
Okay.
well, that is what the building department
Allows.
Yeah, allows them to,
That's
okay.
right.
Retract my statement, sorry about that. All right, moving on to the next item. The first item on our agenda for today is a request submitted by Juan R. Lozano to authorize an exception to literal interpretation of Article 2, Chapter 28 of the Code of Ordinances entitled Sign Regulations by granting a variance to the LED off-premise sign requirements on Lot 5, Block 573, Western Division, located at 2607 San Bernardo Avenue. Before I open this to public hearing, I wanted to discuss briefly with, we have representatives from the city attorney's office here. Our interest in the last time we met, when this came up, was we wanted to find out why it was coming back to us, because we understood that we do not have any, we can't rule on this. This is not jurisdiction for the Board of Adjustment, so if you'll
Okay.
tell us.
So if you go to the sign ordinance, there is a provision where they can get variances from the Board of Adjustment. There is a provision though, however, that they need to first petition the city manager. Okay, so we do have a letter, and I don't know if that's in your
Yes,
packet.
no, we had that.
Yes, okay, so they did go to the city manager, and he then said that he referred it to you all. So they did exhaust that administrative remedy before it comes to you all, and so then
And did the
you all
city
have-
manager make a recommendation on that?
No, he just referred it to you all. And, I mean, we can talk about the law. I mean, it is not your job to rewrite the ordinance, and we can talk about some of the findings that you need to make in reviewing that. But it is before you, and you can grant a variance, but there are some standards, I guess, in reviewing that. And if you would like to hear, more on what those, what that criteria is.
I'd like to hear it, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Okay, so you can grant, you have the authority to authorize an appeal in specific cases.
Can you cite where you're reading, Ms. Paul?
Okay, so I have some notes on some case law, but then also if you want to go to, if you all have a copy of the sign ordinance, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it's at the very end, you have the complete ordinance at the very end of that case.
Right, and what section are
So
you?
2854, and so I don't have a page number unfortunately. So the top of that page doesn't have the section number, but it's,
2854.
yeah.
See, chapter 28, okay, 54.
And so I'll let you all find that, and if y'all want to take a minute to read that.
I don't find it 53.
I don't find 54.
Okay,
Let's
so-
start with the sign owner.
So it starts with, okay, so at the bottom, like if you look, so if you go to 2853,
I think
I think
2854.
28, 27.
so
Yeah, that's the-
2853, do we not have that section? 2854 variances of the sign ordinance?
32.
I believe that might be at the.
I don't have that section, Ms. Paul.
Okay.
I don't think any of us do.
Maybe just read it out.
Well, it's just, it's.
Okay, so 2854 has to do with variances. Okay, so it says when requesting a variance for a permit, the applicant may apply to the administrator for a variance from certain requirements of this code. A variance may be granted by the Board of Adjustment where the literal application of the code would create a particular hardship for the sign user and the following criteria are met. Okay, and it may be, I mean, we can maybe go get them a copy so that they can look at it, but it says a literal application of the code would not allow the property to be used at its highest and best use as zoned variances cannot be granted for unplatted property. The granting of the requested variance would not be material detrimental to the property owners in the vicinity. Okay, so we're taking into account the other property owners. And then a hardship arising for the sign user under a literal interpretation of the code due to unusual conditions, visual impairment, or other unique conditions to that property not caused by the owner and that do not apply generally to the city. And so in other words, that it's something that only applies to them and not to the rest of the city. And it says the granting of the variance shall not be contrary to the general objectives of this code and the land use plan. In granting a variance, the Board of Adjustment may attach additional requirements necessary to carry out the spirit and the purpose of this ordinance. And then there are some cases that also talk about this and that, you know, in order to grant the variance, the applicant would have to show that this particular ordinance is unique, oppressive, and not common to other property and not against the public interest. It's not merely that the property cannot be utilized for its highest and best use. It's not merely financial. It's not self-imposed. And must show that the hardship is simply a hindrance to the developer's goals. So it says the variance must be in accordance with the spirit of the zoning ordinance. But what you can't do is simply rewrite the ordinance, right, to make it, to accommodate the, to accommodate the variance. I know that's a mouthful, and so if we need to, we can maybe make copies so you guys can take a look at it. I didn't realize you all
Mr. Bell, do you
did.
want to look at the provision?
No, I'm a visual person, I have to have the paper.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so okay, so either we can make copies, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that you all didn't have this, I thought this was.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Paul, can I ask a question? Mr. Abel saying that we don't have jurisdiction, is there an answer to that question?
Okay, so it's in the ordinance. Okay, so I'm pulling out the, this is authority of the Board of Ordinances from the local government code. And it says that the concurring vote of 75% of the board is necessary to reverse an order requirement decision or determination of an administrative official. In this case, it was a determination that this did violate, the ordinance. And so we do have an administrative process where they do have to go see the city manager first, which they did. The city manager, and I have that letter, but where he has simply referred it to you all to take a look at.
So the city manager then
Basically,
Punted.
bumped it.
Okay. So then we can just take the ball and run with it then, I guess, right?
Well, we, according to what she's saying, now it rests with us to make a decision.
Right.
Under 24.1, 3.2, the board doesn't have authority to grant variances on signs and outdoor advertising, except as provided.
Okay,
And that would be an appeal from the city manager's decision?
well, that's 24.1, but if you go to 28,
61?
20, wherever.
Is that the one that
Yeah.
appeals?
Yeah,
And
okay.
it goes back and it contradicts it, I guess?
Yeah, but I mean, so there is, it says, except where specifically provided, and then what's specifically provided is it goes to the city manager. So first, the applicant would petition the city manager and says, hey, I need a variance. He then can make a decision, which can then be appealed. Or like in this case, he simply, referred it back to you all to take a look at and for you all to make a decision.
Well, doesn't he have to do something? The city manager
That's what I'm saying.
has to review it and has either reverses the decision of the building official or orders it granted or reinstates a suspended or revoked permit. Did he do any of those things?
So let me pull out his letter. Is it in the packet?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't opened the public hearing yet because I'm discussing this between ourselves. But my thought on this, Paul, is the fact that, look, I would not want to approach this, I would not want this board to approach this until we have something from the city manager asking us to review it and he's making a recommendation, or, because if he's not telling us anything and just sending it to us, it's almost like, hey, I don't want to make a decision, you guys make the decision. I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel.
Right.
Well, he either needs to reverse the decision or order that a permit be granted or reinstate a suspended or revoked permit.
Because that's the
That's the trigger, that's the
So either
trigger.
he goes back what the building official said, or grants the variance. Now, is it, because I used to work for the city and I was a building official, so one of the things that and I helped write one of the city, the ordinance before this one, the state has jurisdiction over that corridor because it's a business 35. So if the state would allow it, would we hinder that approval? Or?
So there's both. There is a state requirement, and so there's a city requirement and a state requirement. And so that even assuming that you all say, yes, we're willing to grant the variance, they would still have to go to the state and then satisfy whatever state requirements
Sure.
are there as well.
And one of the things that we're doing now is we're looking at that, and if the state is fine with it.
But if I remember correctly, on that, the last time we met on this thing, there was there was a discussion, some type of argument or disagreement whether what the street that it was on
Yes,
was
the
actually.
they don't need the designation required for the type of sign that they're applying.
Right,
That's what they're here for the variance.
and there was a disagreement on whether it was arterial or.
Yes, they have to be on a major arterial.
This is major collector.
Right, and it's not.
No, it's a major collector, but they had to be on a
According
major
to the
arterial.
sign ordinance, we don't allow in that section.
But again, and for my, I guess, I'm gonna say the devil's advocate here, but if the state allows it because it's a state-controlled roadway, then why would we, the city, bypass a state law?
Well,
You know what
because,
I'm saying? I mean, it's just a question that I have. I mean, if it's,
because in addition to state requirements, there are also city requirements. And so that's why the city has created, by ordinance, a sign ordinance, that provides for the heights, where they should be. And so there are times where perhaps a variance is needed. And so that is where you all come in and looking at everything and weighing sort of that criteria to see if a variance should be granted.
now let me ask you this, are there other off-premise signs along?
Well, I'll let Mr. Marco Gutierrez answer that because he reviews the signs and he's the one that.
Are there other off-premise signs along business 35 there, Marco?
That I know, I don't think so. In this section, I don't have any information in reference to that type of sign. Off premise,
Because that's what this is, right, an off-premise sign?
Yes.
I would be surprised if there's not. I mean,
But I think but this is an LED. An LED.
well, I mean, off-premise is off-premise. I mean, I think, you know, things have evolved so much since this was, you know, since those signs, if there is signs, I think there are signs up there. But I think it's evolved so much that now, I mean, back then when they installed them, there probably weren't LED signs. Now they're getting to be more, you know.
For the benefit of board member Cavazos who just walked in, we're discussing the sign issue that we discussed at the last meeting. We have Representative Ms. Paul here from the city attorney's office, and we're discussing the fact whether we really have an authority there, or whether we don't have an authority, or whether we want to exercise an authority, or I don't know. I mean, my opinion is if the city manager said he's referring it to us because he's not gonna make a decision, do we have all the information to be able to make this decision? And then, like Andy here says, whether we make a decision, there's still a state code that they have to follow. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm leaving it open right now to discussion right now, before we even open it to public hearing.
Would a state code be incorporated into this language here?
Do they differ at all?
I honestly haven't looked at it.
It references, again, I didn't write this one, but the one that we looked at, we modified the one before this one. And it references state requirements. So if something that we're not covered here in the city ordinance, it falls back to the state requirements for off-premise signs.
So we would need to have the state requirement, look at the state requirements first, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think, let's say if we were to give a variance, I think the applicant would have to go to the state and make sure that they meet their requirements too. You know what I'm saying? And that would be something for the state. I mean, I wouldn't want to make any action on the state requirement. That would be another.
Well, I don't think our board, I don't think our authority, if we do have authority, would carry over to the state.
Okay,
It would only be the city.
Approve a pending authority if we decide, I mean, pending authority from the state.
I mean,
That would be something to consider.
would that be something that we could entertain, is that, have they met the state requirement first? Because maybe if they don't meet the state requirement, there's no need for us to go any further.
Mr. Chair, I'm aware of spacing requirements and other problems with the state law that are specifically, isn't this just one block from 35? It's one block away? One block away?
Yeah, one block away.
So even though it's only one block from 35, it may be a problem because 35 will have those requirements by state law. And it could go as far as, I hear 500, 600 feet from 35.
Well, see, I think that's what Mr. Martinez there is saying, is that it's, it's considered a major
It's a major collector, not
collector
major
instead of major
arterial.
arterial. And that major collector means that it's within so many feet of the
1,500 feet from another sign that if we allow it on that section.
Yeah,
Oh,
so and that's where I'm getting at, that the state, because we're in the business also of off-premise signs too, where I'm at. So I've done some research on some of the state requirements. The state also has authority beyond just the right-of-way. It goes a little bit beyond. So now, actually, to the center line of the right-of-way, it goes beyond it. So they might have jurisdiction over that as well, even if it falls within our metro arterial.
I know, and that's what I'm referring back to, is that, is it conceivable? And I'm just asking the question. Is it conceivable that we could recommend that first it go through the state process before it comes back to us? Because if the state is not going to authorize it, why in the world would we want to even discuss it?
We have a tabulation that is showing that major collector is not allowed to have off-premise signs.
Mr. Chair, I have another problem with it. I don't think it's right for appeal by this body. I mean, reading the appeal language, because the city manager did receive that application or appeal from the decision of the building official, he either needed to reverse that decision and order a permit granted or reinstate a suspended or revoked permit. He did none of those things. We can only take his result, and it says, if the person is not satisfied with that resulting decision, he can appeal to the board. There's been no resulting decision, so far as I can tell.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, I mean, and I understand what Mr. Laredo is saying, and, you know, with all due respect, I mean, what he has, if someone appeals to him, okay, then what he does is he looks at it, and if you look at his letter, he says, he points to the, I guess the ordinance and says, I don't have the power to waive any ordinance. Okay, so that's his decision, because essentially what he's asking for is he's asking him to waive a particular provision in the ordinance, and he says, I don't have the power to do that. However, if you want to waive a particular provision, or in this case get a variance, you would need to talk to the Board of Adjustment. So that's what he's doing, is he's saying, I can't waive.
So his decision was to uphold the decision of the building official.
I mean, that's arguably, that's what he's doing, because he says, I can't waive any provision of this
So, yeah,
ordinance.
so I think, Louis, I think what he's saying, what they're saying is that it has been, by virtue of the ordinance itself, it has been denied.
Right.
It has been denied, the fact. And now he's saying, okay, I don't have any authority to waive it, but go to the board. So
Appeal to the board.
So appeal to the board, and my thought here is, okay, fine, you pointed out where there is a jurisdiction that they can come to the board, but I'm still leery of approaching this until such time that, you know, do we have this, if it hasn't gone in front of the state, why should we entertain it?
Do you have the state provision there? No?
Is there an application process that goes through the state?
There's,
So if there's an application process that goes through and to the state, why wouldn't we recommend that that process take place first? And then, depending upon what happens, because based on what you're saying, I don't think it's gonna pass the state.
I don't think so either, Mr. Chair.
So, I mean, that would be my recommendation, but I'd like to hear from the other board members.
Well, it makes sense, I would agree with that.
I think you got it right.
I would
Mr.
agree with
Chair.
that, because like I said, you know, we could, and say something to the fact that, send it back to, or refer it to the state, you know, and pending that decision, you know, for us to, well, if it does that, I don't see why we have to take any action, you know?
Well, and see, but also, the other fear that I have is that, let's say we were to say yes, and the state says no, then all of a sudden, we're gonna be in between, in the
Yeah.
catch-22 situation
agree.
where somebody could come to us in a court of law and say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
the city authorized it, even though the state didn't. So we're gonna become a part of a bigger
No,
problem.
it has to come from the state first, and then if it needs to come back here for just formal approval, or, you know, then.
Well, or at that point in time, we'll look and see
Exactly.
everything about it. I personally, in reading everything, I don't see that I would want to support it. But I'm not here to say that it's my vote that's gonna take place. I would much rather have the state look at it first, and based on what they say, maybe there's a state appeal process, and if the person can make the argument to the state, then we would hear that argument as well for us.
Totally
So,
agree with that.
based on that,
So the applicant hasn't even.
Do you have it open?
no, now I'm gonna go ahead and, okay, so at this point now, I'd like to, need a motion to open the public hearing.
I so move.
Okay, I have a
Second.
motion to open the public hearing
Second.
and a second, and, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is there anybody here to speak on behalf of this process?
Good afternoon,
Yes, sir.
board members. My name is Juan Lozano. I have a statement for you guys for you. I'm here today as a member of Jensen Investments, which my wife and I are the only members. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and present my appeal before you. I also want to thank Ms. Ana Villarreal, because even though the city planning department opposes my appeal, Mrs. Villarreal has always been very respectful towards me. I'm here before the board to appeal the decision of the Building Development and Services Department, which was made on July the 10th, 2018, and to request an exception to the City of Laredo sign ordinance, Chapter 28, Article 2. Now allow Jessica LLC to place an off-premise LED sign, dimensions 15 by 10, on the property located at 2607, which is owned by my wife and I. I believe it has been established that this board has the authority to grant the exception. It is my position that granting this exception will not change or injure any appropriate use of buildings adjacent to our property. Granting this exception will not change the character of San Bernardo Avenue district, which San Bernardo is located, as there are currently 4 off-premise signs located along San Bernardo Avenue. Even though there were grandfathered in, but there are still 4 off-premise signs. There's more than 60 on-premise signs along San Bernardo Avenue. By you granting this exception, it will not adversely affect the purpose of the City of Laredo sign ordinance, which is to reduce visual clutter. There are 3 properties adjacent to our property. 2 other properties are used as residences, and the 3rd being a hotel. If the Board of Adjustments were to grant an exception, we would agree for the LED sign to be in operation during the specified time, not to affect our neighbors. The Board of Adjustments, by granting this exception, will not substantially injure the neighboring properties or the public, as the proposed sign will meet all the City of Laredo setback requirements. I am aware of San Bernardo Avenue being controlled by the State of Texas Commercial Sign Regulatory Program. I have been in communication with that department. It is my understanding that the proposed sign meets the state Texas spacing requirements. I have correspondence from the Commercial Sign Regulatory Program, which states that my application for a license and permit will be considered if the City of Laredo Board of Adjustments grants me the exception. If granted an exemption, we will plan on donating back to the community by donating advertising for law enforcement agencies and non-profit organizations. We would also use the LED sign to display Amber Alerts and other emergency alerts instantly to the public in crisis situations. I want to thank you, and I can answer any questions you have. I didn't speak because you had not opened the meeting, right? But I understand your concerns, and I don't take this lightly. I've been in communication with the Texas State Sign Department, and according to them, if I have a permit, and in this case, I also exposed to them that I had an appeal pending before the Board of Adjustments and the city manager. And according to them, they say, well, if the city grants you the exception, then we'll take that into consideration, and we'll take that as part of your application. That doesn't mean they're going to grant me the permit and license. If they just take that into consideration. But before I apply, I have to have that exception, or I have to have that signed permit. That's what they told me.
And which permit are we talking about here?
It's a building permit. That's what they consider.
So, building permit?
A building permit. So if I was to get the exception, and the City of Laredo would grant me the building permit, I still have to apply before the State of Texas, and I have to meet the requirements. The requirements is that even though he said 1,500 feet, it's 1,500 feet. That sign, and I have to make a correction because I think Mr. Lombarania had specified that he wanted to build it 34 feet tall. It can't be 30 feet tall because it cannot be seen by traffic along 35. That's one of the requirements, as they explained to me. So traffic on 35 that sign cannot be seen by traffic on 35. It also has to be within 300 feet of other signs, and there's another sign that is there, and it's within the 300 feet. Another requirement for them is that those signs have to be permitted and licensed. So a lot of the signs are not permitted. The people that advertise, they don't issue permits, or they don't grant the permits on a yearly basis. So if it's not protected by a permit or license, then it doesn't count.
Please understand that we're not here to discuss anybody else's.
No, I understand.
signs.
I'm just saying that when I was discussing
it's enough of a problem for us because
when I was discussing I
I
understand that, and I don't take it lightly. I understand, and what they explained to me is there's 300 feet within that street. As long as it's not seen by traffic along 35, then they would consider my application for a permit license. So it's not a guarantee they're going to give it to me, like if you were to grant me this exception, I would go ahead and apply before the state of Texas. And the state of Texas, since it controls San Bernardo Avenue, either they grant me the permit and license, or they just deny it. So, and, I mean, I understand that that you never heard this before, and like I said, I don't take it lightly, but I think that there's a lot of signs in San Bernardo, and I think that it won't affect. I'm willing to turn it off at night, so it won't affect the neighbors or the hotel.
Is there any questions for?
I have a couple.
Go ahead, sir.
What are you using the property for right now?
I'm renting the property. I'm renting it to a barber shop and tattoo shop. I don't live there. I just bought the property and then we rented it out. So I understand that means the city attorney has mentioned a variance, but I'm requesting an exception. And according to the state of Texas, an exception, I don't have to demonstrate a hardship, economic hardship. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I've done a lot of research, you know. So, I mean, like I said, if you were to grant me the exception, that it's not a guarantee that I'm going to get it. I mean, the state of Texas will be the determining agency.
Another question.
Well, why not go to the state first?
Because I tried that.
No, well, I'd like to, let me stop. I have, along that same line, I have a question for Ms. Paul here, is that could we, could we, as a board, ask for clarification from the state whether the process is that we should or could or must make a decision before it gets, because what Mr. Masano is saying is that they're saying over there, we'll take into consideration, but if you don't, if we don't make a decision here, can they still make a decision?
Yeah, if you need additional information.
Because I think there's other issues other than,
Yes.
in other words, the distances, the distances that we're talking about.
Yes.
You're in disagreement with what it is. I'd like that to be clarified and everything else to be in front of us, authorized before we take it.
In other words, the technical stuff is like the second part of this.
Yeah.
First, we need to know the legal, whether.
I think it's just a chicken egg argument, you know?
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, I have correspondence from the state of Texas.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask you, do you have correspondence, you know, and was it submitted to you all?
No, not the letter.
No, but it is specifically that area that speaks of what you just mentioned, you know, about, that it would be up to the local board ordinances and the city, you know, to.
Yeah, specific to that. That's what I would be
Yes.
interested in knowing, whether they
I only have one
specifically
copy,
said.
but,
Go ahead and pass it over. Pass it to Ms. Paul. Let her see it.
Okay. So, I mean, he's showing an email that he received from someone at TxDOT that says that they've reviewed the sign ordinance and it meets state requirements.
It meets state requirements.
It meets state requirements. Therefore, the appeal decision from the city will not affect our decision. If you meet our rules, we will issue a permit. So in other words, but it says if you meet our rules.
Yes, I understand it. And-
Right. So obviously you will have to meet all the rules of both entities to be able to actually construct the sign.
But the first part, you said it, that it does meet state requirement?
It says the sign ordinance meets state, our
Well,
requirements.
Our sign ordinance?
Yes, as we
Or
reviewed
the
the sign
sign-
ordinance.
No, from the state.
Well,
Did you send them our sign ordinance?
Yes, what I wrote on the email, I sent the sign ordinance, and I explained to them that I was in the process of appealing the denial of the permit. And I was in communication with them telephonically, also by email. And so they themselves said, you know what, we cannot say yes or no to you until we talk to our attorney. And that's when they wrote that to me, saying that based on my explanation of what I was trying to do, if you were to grant me an exception, then I still have to meet their requirements, which is the spacing requirements. If it doesn't meet the spacing requirements, they'll not issue a permit, and that would be.
So I think what I'm understanding by what she's reading here is that you haven't requested the permit, the state permit based on spacing requirements and everything else. What you've said is that our ordinance meets their requirements, and if we were to, that's what I'm interpreting.
That's how I'm interpreting it as well.
Respectfully, what I did, I wanted to apply, and when they told me, we will not accept an application without a permit to build a sign, and in this case, the ordinance. So that's the reason I was in communication with them. So
Well,
if I don't have the permit, they're not gonna accept my application, and that's what they wrote to me.
I'm sorry to be the pessimist in this thing, but I would like to hear that honestly from our own attorneys, that if you were to inquire with them whether we need to make a decision before they make a decision. Now, if they make a decision based on everything else, other than just the zoning or the placement of the sign, then it comes back to us and we could look into it. But I think that everything else, meeting the distance requirement that you're talking about right there, everything else, the fact that it's on a major collector instead of a major arterial, which I'd like to know that it meets everything there, and then we would approach.
They have a business and they have 2 parkings?
Yes, there's parking in it.
You want to put the sign on you wanna lose 1 parking or?
It meets the requirements on the spacing, that would be,
Because you have a handicap ramp
yes,
outside.
yes, there's a handicap. I don't know if you've seen it,
But that's something,
Yeah.
is that city or is that state you're talking about?
City.
Well, if it's city, then that would come before, I guess, us. But I'm asking that everything from the state past the thumbs up test, and they would issue the permit, and then it would come to us to talk about these other issues. I mean, does that make sense, does it?
It does, I mean, it sounds like from what he's saying is that in order to submit, whatever the permit there to get permission from TxDOT, first he has to have a permit from the city, because they won't issue it, even if you all say yes, I mean, they won't do anything
Yes.
until we do it.
Mr. Chairman, can I speak? If you were to grant me the exception and issue me a permit, and with a copy of the minutes, then they'll take that into consideration. So, in essence, if you were to make a decision today, they themselves will take that into consideration, and if it does meet the requirements on the spacing, then they will issue me a permit, based on the city permit.
Okay, you made a reference a few moments ago that this is not a variance, it's an exception, and you used the word hardship.
Well,
In other words, and I'd like more of an explanation why you feel that this would be necessary as a hardship.
it's not a hardship.
Well,
but
as an exception.
Okay, so on the municipal, like I said, I'm not an attorney, but I've done research, right? So there's a difference between exceptions and variances. And variances, you have to meet certain requirements. And one of the requirements in the variances, as she explained to you, was like I have to meet a hardship, I have to have hardship, and I cannot have created this hardship myself. But the exception, I don't have to meet it. I don't have to meet the hardship requirement on the exception. So if you grant me the exception, that means I don't have to meet that requirement.
I understand, but an exception based on what?
Based-
Why should we, I'm asking the question myself, I'm not anybody else. Why should this board give you an exception if the variances are there for a reason?
But that's based on my appeal, because it's my position that San Bernardo, there's plenty of signs, and there's also grandfather signs. And the sign that I want to build in there is not a big sign. I mean, and if you grant me the exception as for it to be smaller, I'm okay with that. You see what, you understand what I'm saying? I'm not requesting for it to be out in some other street, San Bernardo. It's like, I mean, there's so many signs in San Bernardo. There's also off-premise signs that have been built there, and that I guess they were grandfathering. So this is the only reason I'm requesting that.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and close this part of the public hearing. Is there anybody to speak in denial of this?
There is an off-premise sign nearby, within 300 feet from his address,
In the gas station.
so he wouldn't meet those
But
1,500 feet.
that's something the state has to do, not us.
Yeah, but I mean, if there's still sign within 300 feet, which is.
It's
from his
305
address.
feet,
No, 305 feet.
and
But-
the state requires 300
Yeah,
feet.
but that's a state requirement, and so I think let the state handle that part.
Yeah.
That's a state requirement.
Okay, is there anybody to speak in denial of this, against this process? Once again, I ask, is there anybody to speak against this? With nothing, no further, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
I so moved.
So I have a motion
Second.
and a second to close the public hearing. All right, gentlemen, what would we like to do?
Personally, and
That's fine.
understanding the state, I mean, well, the state sent it back to us, and my own personal view is that I don't see anything wrong with it, personally, with that. If this is the picture of that sign we're talking about, okay? And, but that's my opinion.
I agree, I mean, I think, because again, I'm in the, part of my business is also off-premise signs, and if it's allowed by the state, I mean, it should be allowed by the state. And San Bernardo, to me, again, is a state highway. I used to work for Texas as well. And I know that there's a lot of signs on San Bernardo that to me, so long as it's controlled, which is what the state is trying to do, which is the city's trying to do also. Again, with the animated signs as well, I mean, so long as it's controlled, which is, it's gonna be controlled in one way or the other, but the spacing, whether it be the city or the state, that's what the state requirement and the city requirements are for, to control the animated, the spacing of off-premise and the spacing of animated signs, so to me, they meet those requirements.
So he's complying with the state?
I think he is, because again, we do off-premise signs as well. I think he is fine, but again, that's not a decision that I'm gonna make, but if the state makes it, that he is, then
And we approve it, then he still has to go to the state.
Yeah, he still has to go through
Yeah,
the
so,
state. I mean,
I personally, I don't see anything.
I mean, the state doesn't even do the maintenance and monitoring on San Bernardo, so why are we gonna go and
Exactly.
and do the stuff for the signs?
What we have right now, we have a lot of complaints in reference to the signs on the right of way.
Well, I think our duty is not to worry about what the state does, is to worry about our city. Yeah, that's our burden, is, that people comply with our ordinance. We don't care what the state says. If they allow it, great. If they don't, great. But we have to take each case under our ordinance and apply each set of facts to our ordinance. The problem I have is, I don't see anything really unique or unusual or that this property is somehow needs to have a variance. It's the same old as any lot down San Bernardo. I don't see any. I asked him, what are you doing with it? I'm renting it. Well, is he not getting the highest and best use as zoned because of the failure to get that sign? I don't see that. I think, it's zoned, he's renting it, that's the highest and best use. What is it, a B3?
B3.
A B3? So and I'm reading the request for the variance, and I'm going down the line, and it says a particular hardship for the sign user. I don't see that he's got a hardship, he's rented the property. It says, would not allow him to use it as highest and best use. Well, it's zone B3, and he's got it rented for some kind of business there or something. Okay. It would not be material or detrimental to the property owners in the vicinity. I don't know about that, it could be, bright and stuff, but. And then lastly, it talks about unusual conditions as to this property. It's got some kind of, it's visually impaired, or somehow people can't see it, or there's some other unique condition about the property. I just don't see it here.
Were property owners in the vicinity advised of this meeting?
No, we do not send notifications.
Because, how is anybody going to speak on behalf or
We
against?
publish our agenda, we post our agenda, but we're not required to send
Okay, that's
notifications.
fine.
And I, you know, I see what you're saying, but I think he said that he wasn't asking for a variance, it was an exception to the thing, so I think there's a little difference on this
Yeah,
one.
in the language.
Yeah, and again, I'm a little biased because I'm in that industry where we're trying to utilize, I mean, we have other uses where we have our sign on, but I mean, if we can use it to betterment our, you know, ourselves, you know, get some extra cash flow, we're gonna do that. I mean, if it's allowed, again, by the spacing, and there are brightness requirements too here, that the city and the state would monitor the brightness of it, you know. So, I mean, again, that's my opinion.
Yeah, but the fact that it doesn't meet the requirements of, you know, of the city, does that,
I mean, the part that it doesn't meet, again, goes back to, I think, is the designation of the roadway. And again,
is that the only thing it doesn't meet?
Yeah, in a nutshell, why doesn't it comply with the
I think
local
it's
ordinance?
the designation of the roadway. I think that it's.
You can't have a sign at all.
No, you can, but it's just that for this specific off-premise, it doesn't, I guess it's not allowed through the.
Just because it's off premise?
No, because it's a
Major collector.
collector instead of major arterial.
That's
But I mean,
probably-
that can be debatable too.
Wait, are signs allowed on that, are animated signs allowed on San Bernardo? So why is this one not?
That's what I'm saying, like,
And I've seen several, but not like this is the digital one, you know,
yeah.
right?
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what are they breaking, what part of the code are they not?
It's, I guess, the off-premise sign for digital, is that correct, Michael?
LED.
Yeah, LED. You see, and again, it goes back to,
They can have on-premise.
in other words, they can have any other business there can have an on-premise sign, the same thing, on-premise, but he can't have one that's gonna advertise for other people.
Oh.
Which, I don't know, I mean, again, I'm in the business, so we're doing off-premise signs, and to me, it just seems.
Okay.
It
I
just
think
seems.
we've discussed.
Basically, if it was a sign for the
For
business
his
center,
business,
it would be allowed.
he wouldn't even be here.
Yeah, okay. And I am gonna vote to approve.
Well, there's no-
Well,
there's no
we have to have a
yet.
motion
I'd
first.
like to make a motion that we approve his request.
I second.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
I-
but just for clarification, this is an exception just to the designate, the location, right, the placement. We're not granting a variance on other requirements that the
It's an
city
No,
may
he
have.
still has to go through the state and everything else. I mean,
Okay.
this is, from my understanding, it's to allow.
And the location
based
is
on-
a setback from,
No.
the location, excuse, not a setback. The location is where the sign is
That's
placed.
correct. So we're putting as a condition that he still needs to go through the state and meet other city requirements that. may
Other
be
city
applicable.
requirements and/or state requirements.
Okay.
This is, to me, it sounds like a preliminary approval, you know.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to accept the exception request by Mr. Lozano. Is there any discussion, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by raising hand, please.
Aye.
All those against? And I'm going to abstain. Because I don't think we have enough information really to make this request. So the motion carries.
And I'll go through the state.
Now, you know, Mr. Lozano, obviously you're still going to have to go through
Yes, I
state
understand.
and everything.
I understand, and I want to thank you, and like I said, if the state denies it for whatever, for my space and whatever reason, I want to thank you for
At least you came here.
allowing me
At
the
that.
opportunity to come.
All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Mr. Lozano, I'll contact you in the afternoon to let you know what goes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your afternoon.
Okay, moving on to our next. We have a request submitted by Mr. Guillermo Raúl Ugalde Jr. to authorize an exception to the literal interpretation of Laredo Land Development Code, Section 2477, entitled Dimensional Standards, by granting a variance to the setback requirements of Lot C Block 527 Eastern Division located at 920 San Carlos Street. Is there anybody to speak on behalf of this? All right, sir. I need a motion to open the public hearing. Have a motion?
Second.
And a second, open the public hearing. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, sir, go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Raul Galde, and I'm here representing the owner of the property. We intend to construct 10 apartment units in that property. We're asking for a variance of 10 feet in the setback in the rear, only because it'll give us enough room to put 10 storage sheds, and we can rent those for possibly $25 a month, $3,000 a year extra for us. Without the variance, we won't be able to accommodate those storage sheds. We do have a setback, we are meeting setback requirements for the front, 20 feet. We have 10 feet to one side in the corner, 5-foot setback to the west. The request is for the north side of the lot.
So the only setback request is to the rear.
Rear, right.
From a 20-foot setback to a 10-foot
You
setback.
can see it on the site plan.
Would that be the
It's
north side
shaded.
of the
North
property?
side.
Yeah, the north side, it's shaded red.
Yeah.
That is the structure that is encroaching into the setback.
Look, you can see it on this one easier.
Oh.
A little further back.
You went too far.
There we go.
Okay, is there any questions for Mr. Butler? So you're still gonna be 5 feet, wait, yeah, you're still gonna be 5 feet from the utility. The utility easement is underneath the 5 foot, right? So you won't be anywhere near that?
No, we'll be
Right up to,
we'll be, yeah.
almost right up to.
So is that 5 plus 10? I don't think what.
That's what I'm wondering too.
No,
Current
it's 10
setback?
feet. No, the setback is, we're 5 feet from the utility easement and 10 feet from the property line.
No.
So you're talking about the storage units, that actually you,
The storage sheds, and then the square you see around it is just a sidewalk.
Is it what?
Sidewalk. Concrete.
Let me ask you this, is it gonna be sprinkled too?
Sprinkled?
Sprinkled, I mean, your apartments have to be sprinkled or no?
Yes, we have a fire sprinkler system, yeah. We have a riser right there in the corner.
No, I'm just, is the fire department gonna make you sprinkle those units as well?
I'm not sure, I'm not the contractor.
Okay.
But whatever we have to comply with the
Yeah,
world.
I think they might.
Yeah, I mean, it's an $800,000 investment to that area, and it's potentially $12,000 to $14,000 in taxes
And they're
a year
attached
for the city of Laredo.
Yeah.
I think the city-
It is attached, so
And the
you,
regular setback would be at 20?
20.
yeah.
And that's because it's only, if it was a B.
See there, look, they're asking from 20 to 10, the first page.
Does B zone allow for apartments also or no? It does, right?
This is an R2 zone.
Yeah, but if it was a B zoning, it would allow for 10 foot, right? So we would be good. I mean, a B zone would allow for apartments, right?
Yes.
It's a limited.
These
right?
also, that's 10 feet.
Yeah. So if it was zoned as a B1, they would allow apartments and we'd be 10 feet and
10
he'd be
feet.
fine.
Yes.
And residential 20.
Is there anybody, any other questions?
I have a question, that storage is for rent, what's for the personal use?
It's for renting, yeah, it's for the tenants.
Are you gonna rent them to these same
Yes.
individuals?
Yes. The same individuals. That eliminates some clutter in the front, and they're the size, they're by 6 by 6, I believe, and there's enough to fit a bicycle.
But that's residential, thing.
An R2 only allows for multifamily.
Yeah, allows apartments, not storage units to rent.
Why they didn't come up with anything that says they cannot rent them.
They're gonna be for the,
But no, they're gonna be for the tenants, but he's gonna rent it to them.
Yeah,
Sure, you can do that.
If they want.
We do that.
there's nothing telling me I cannot.
Or,
There's nothing prohibiting me from doing it.
let me check.
I think, you need for storage, you need a B3, but that's mini storage, that's.
The other
regular
reason also
storage
for this
units.
additional rent,
This is not the
this
main
additional
use.
income is,
Storing is
our
not
debt
the
coverage
main
ratio is pretty thin
Auxiliary use.
for the bank loan. So we can't get that additional 3,000 a year, then it might just stay a vacant lot.
Any other question?
But.
The owner is my brother-in-law, do I need to, can I?
Can I always ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
At the end of the day,
I would ask you
though,
to abstain.
if those apartment unit owners or renters don't rent those units, you could theoretically rent one to me?
Theoretically, but why would I? I would like to save it. It's more attractive for the tenant to be able to rent the storage unit in the same property.
So it wouldn't be an outside business, it basically
No.
would be attached to
No,
the,
it's in the
it would be rentable by the owners of the units.
Yeah, it's an added incentive or an amenity for the
Yes.
tenants, but I can still make money off of it, right?
Right. All right, I need anybody to speak in denial of this process? Once again, is there anybody to speak in denial of this process?
According
right,
according with the title use, the accessory building need to have 10 feet from separation from the building.
And it's back to back?
It's attached, isn't it?
Attached.
Yeah, so it's not an accessory unit, it's an attached.
It's attached, it's not an accessory building. If it's attached,
Storage.
but, I mean, it's attached. All right, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
That's a move.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Right.
All right, gentlemen, what are we gonna do here?
Well, I'm close to relevant, so I think as long as he meets, I mean, if it was if you were to change the zone to B1, it'd be allowed. It's gonna be sprinkled, I mean, we're gonna get some.
We're assuming it's gonna be sprinkled.
Well, I'm sure the fire department's gonna make it,
Yeah.
just by the way it looks, their paths, they're gonna have to sprinkle it. I mean,
Yeah.
typically you want that setback in the back so that you can avoid any fire, you know, you wanna have that fire break in there between the property, so I think it's,
Okay, I need a motion.
so I motion to allow to do the variance as.
A motion?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? A motion and a second to accept the variance request submitted by Mr. Ugalde. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. He abstained. Let the record reflect that Mr. Cavazos abstains.
Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you. Our third one is a request submitted by Mr. Martin Cantu and Isha Cantu to authorize an exception to the literal interpretation of the Laredo Land Development Code, Section 24-77, entitled Dimensional Standards, by granting a variance to the lot width requirements on the north 34 feet of Lot 4, Block 372, Eastern Division, located at 1718 Santa Ursula Avenue. Is there anybody here to speak on behalf of this?
See? Yes, sir.
Okay,
I just need a permit to build the office in the lot. The size of the lot is a little...
yes, I'm with you. I need a motion to open the public hearing. I have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, sir, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Okay. The size of the lot is a little bit smaller than what it needs to be, but the construction is
Or
small.
the size of the building is a little bit larger.
No, the size of the building is gonna be a small building, but I wanna furnish a out-of-sales business there for me and my family. So all we need is the permit to make the construction there. All the building's gonna be with all the law, it needs to be made there. And the sides and the back space, they're all we need is the permit for the size of the lot. It's,
I'm not quite understanding this on the lot width. What do we have to do with lot width?
The thing is that property, used to be, like, there used to be a different dimension to the property, but back in the 40s, and I have the original plat, it got subdivided. So because of the subdivision, his property ended up being 34 feet, which does not comply with our current regulations that says that he needs to have 46 feet. So in order for him to build the shed that he wants to build for his business, he went through the building department and he needed this variance to get it approved. So he's, with the plans that he submitted, he is in compliance with the setbacks with the rear, the front, and the back, but he's not in compliance with the width of the property.
Side
That's
setbacks.
We saw
Yes.
this last week, last month.
Yeah, we saw a similar.
Yeah, how far out?
It sounds very familiar.
What is the
right?
remaining setback once he puts his building in?
He actually has a very, very small structure. You can see it. He is respecting all the setbacks that the city of Laredo requires. He has a building that is, it's so small.
You actually want to build, it's an office building, right? The office?
It's 14 feet by 20 feet.
Yeah.
And so he'll have 14 feet left of setback.
He's using 14 feet and he has 20 feet of setback that he's respecting. 10 and 10. He has
Oh,
10
10.
and then 14 and then the 10.
He's respecting all the setbacks. The lot, by definition, the size of his lot is too narrow to build anything on. But there's already structure there. It's
What is
just
that
a-
It's a vacant property.
Oh, it's vacant. I
He
thought I
hasn't
saw it.
built. Well, he
What is the
he's
zone?
using it to
Tower
personal
Street.
use, but there's not a building
B1?
on it there.
And
He
was
hasn't
this,
built.
as you said, subdivided in 1940s? That means that somebody did a deed where they said, I give you the west whatever of that lot?
That's correct. Now, in order to
That's-
properly subdivide, you have to go through the replatting process, but before, that is, the conveyance before 1979 is.
It would be like a grandfather thing, you know, right?
It was, well, we had no planning ordinance.
Yeah, right.
Any questions? I have a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? All right, what do we want to do?
I feel like we should approve.
We have a
this
precedent
before-
here.
Yeah, well, for one, we have precedent. For two, I mean, he's got this piece of land, he wants to develop something on it. He's respecting the setbacks.
Right.
So for me, it's a no-brainer.
Second.
I have a
So,
motion.
make a motion.
Is that a motion to approve?
The longest motion ever.
I have a motion and a second to authorize the variance request submitted by Mr. Cantu. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Motion to close? Motion, no, we don't need a motion to close. Meeting adjourned. Okay. Let's go.
I'm Louis, by the way.
Richard.
Richard. And you guys?
Louis, I mentioned before. Memo Cavazos.
Who?
Memo Cavazos.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know his dad?
Yeah, sure.
He's just a younger prop out of this.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
You know, not related, huh?
relation.
No.
No,
No, but
Well, it's gonna
you don't want to be
take me a while to
related.
get up to speed.
These meetings are fun.
Well, it's gonna take me a while to get up to speed.
Yeah, and I mean, you see a lot what goes
Now,
on.
what did we do on the sign, dude? Did we say, yes or no?
Approve it and,
Subject to mistakes.
Come every single time.
No, actually,
I mean,
we
I'll be
just
honest
use
with
the
you,
agendas for
I
everybody,
still
and nobody
think
comes, and
that
usually
we shouldn't even be involved with it. I kind of agree with what Louis said. Make the city manager.
Then I need to ask Chrissy.
Yeah.
But this is the way I see it. If the content of the sign was just advertising what's there,
Except when we make
he
special
wouldn't-
he wouldn't have an issue.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, but then the sign wouldn't be 10 by 15 either.
That would be great.
A non-premise sign is limited in size.